Thank you for joining us for our fifth session of UnifiMD IQ Insights and Quick Wins. Sharpen your workflow with fast, focused sessions. Hello, everyone. My name is Juan, and I will be your host for this session. I've been with CHS since 2012. I started as a service and support specialist and later transitioned to become part of the UnifiMD training team. Presenting today, we have Eric, who has been a valued member of the CHS family as a UnifiMD trainer since 2023. He will be guiding us through the clinical assessments building process, building accurate and efficient evaluations in UnifiMD. Eric will walk us through several key areas, including what a clinical assessment is, why would you use a clinical assessment, when should it be used in your workflow, and how to create and customize clinical assessments in UnifiMD. With that, I'll turn over to Eric to get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, Juan. So clinical assessments are one of the most flexible tools inside UnifiMD. And this feature allows your office to collect and store additional information that may not exist anywhere else inside of the patient chart. Every practice has unique workflows and different reporting requirements, or different clinical questionnaires that they need to keep track of. And so clinical assessments give you the ability to build those directly into your system so your team can document the information consistently and effectively.
Eric, question. We often hear of offices asking about automating scores for screening tools. Would that be helpful for things like depression or anxiety questionnaires?
Yes, so it definitely would. It would remove the need for any sort of manual calculations, and it would help ensure that the scoring is always consistent. So I just shared my screen so that I can show you an example here. And you'll see there's a bunch of different clinical assessments that I have here, and I'll show you, to answer your question, the PHQ-9 questionnaire. So I'm going to click in, and you would normally just kind of double click and open up that clinical assessment. I already have it open, so we're going to go over here. So from here, so this is your PHQ-9 questionnaire. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with this questionnaire. Many practices use this to quickly document patient responses and track depression screening scores over time. You may know that part of this questionnaire is that depending on the choice that the patient chooses, there's a value with that that has to be calculated. So you'll notice that we have this newer feature here called the Calculate Count feature, which totals the patient's responses and generates a final score when you click the Calculate button when you're doing it inside of the patient's chart. So here you can see the list of those 9 different PHQ-9 questions. And a little bit later in this video, we're going to go over how you would actually create a brand new questionnaire. But for now, I'm just going to show you a couple different examples. So PHQ-9 is kind of that main example that Juan just asked about. But you could also use it for something like workers' comp information, where you might want to keep track of information that stays the same throughout the entirety of the case, such as employer insurance information, claim numbers, different dates of the injury or accident, or like case manager contact information. One important thing to note here as we talk about these different clinical assessments is that if you keep this type of information inside of a progress note or somewhere else in the system, you may need to enter it in like every single time you do a progress note. Whereas if you just do it inside of a clinical assessment like this, you can set it up so that that information automatically carries forward to each new progress note. So you only have to enter this information in once, and then it pulls through going forward, which makes documenting your notes even quicker. Another very common reason that you would want to use a clinical assessment would be something like quality reporting, or really any sort of different reporting in general. Here we can see an example of a MIPS 2026 reporting for quality reporting measures. And this is something that can change based on practices and different information. So we're not going to focus too much on this particular one here, but just know that if there is something that you want to be able to report from, then it has to be structured data. And if that data doesn't have a natural home, such as these different problems or questionnaires or things like that, clinical assessments is that main landing place for all of those weird outlier data points.
Eric, for a practice looking to implement this, about how long would it take to build something like this?
That's a really good question. So Once you get used to the process, you can actually build out most of these different clinical assessments in just a couple minutes. Well, let's say 5 to 10 minutes, especially for if it's a little bit bigger like this one here. But it's definitely not a thing that takes a very long period of time once you know what you're working with. And so now that's what I'm going to show you is some tips and tricks how to build these different clinical assessments. So the way that you do that, and this is kind of the same way you build anything inside of Unify, is by going to the Guides tab. And inside the Guides tab, you have all the different things you can kind of modify inside Unify, and we're going to go over to the clinical assessment. From here, I'm going to click on clinical assessment, and then again, click on clinical assessment. This will bring us back to that first screen that we were looking at, where we can see the list of different clinical assessments that have been built inside the system. So from here, we're going to build a new one instead of opening an existing one. So I'm going to go down and click on New in the bottom left-hand corner. And then from here, we're going to enter in what we would want that code to be. And the code is more just an identifier for the system. So you can kind of just make it something like PHQ2. And then you may want the actual name to be kind of more filled out, like a PHQ2 questionnaire. And then you can give it a description. So for the description, we actually usually for something like a PHQ2 would use something like this, where it's saying, over the past 2 weeks, how often have you been bothered by? And then the questions are those different answers. So now that we have the code, name, and description, we're going to go down to the lower area here and fill in those 2 questions for the questionnaire. So we're going to go first to the name field. This field does have some limitations as to what you can put in there. Basically just alphanumeric, but you can use dashes and underscores, but no other special characters. It does also have a limit to how much you can put in there. So you may want to kind of make some of your questions a little bit briefer than the full, paragraph that they might be. So in this case, we're going to do little interest or pleasure in doing things. And so now we have to set up that calculated count to be able to properly calculate the count of those different questions. So what we're going to do is go to data type and go to commons and do a drop-down list with value. So this is the option that lets you put in a different list with different options and assign a value to calculate with each one of those options. We'll go over some of the different data types shortly. One thing that I did forget to mention is you do want to, in this type of case, check the calculate count box up here in the top, as that is what will make this a calculatable form and work with these drop-down lists with values. So from here, we have our first question. And then what we want to do is actually make the list of different options and values that go with it. So we're going to navigate over to this list field here and click the drop-down in that row. And then we're going to go into the name and put in our first option, which would be not at all. And the value for not at all is 0. So now I'm going to go through and enter the rest of the options for this example, so you can see the process. Whoa! And if you ever make a typo, this is how you can fix it. And then finally, the last option. And then we'll put a 3 in there. So you can see it's that easy to go in, select, create the question, and then the list with the values that will calculate. So what this means is when we actually fill this in, these different values here will correspond with these options in the questionnaire. And when you hit the calculate button, if you chose nearly every day, it would choose a 3 and add that to the calculation. All right. So now we're going to do the second one because it's a PHQ2. There's another question. And this is good so that you can see kind of the whole process one more time. So for this one, it's going to be feeling down, depressed, or hopeless. Again, we're going to choose the common data type, drop-down list with value. And then we're going to go over to the list and fill in that same list. You can use the tab key, as you can see me now doing. And if you tab when you're done, it will create a new row. There, perfect. All right, and so now we have a completed PHQ-2 questionnaire. So now I'm going to go down to the lower right-hand corner and click on Save, and show you what this actually looks like inside of the patient's chart. So to go into a patient's chart, we're going to go up to the top left-hand corner and click on Dictionaries and then Patients. And from here, you could go into a patient's chart and you could look someone up, or we can just pick somebody here. And then from here, we're going to go to the Clinical Assessment tab. And you can see a list of all of the different clinical assessments that are currently built in the system. And here is our brand new PHQ-2 questionnaire that we just created. So now to fill this out for a patient, we would go down and click on New, and we can fill in the patient's answers to both of those questions. And it's that easy. And at that point, we can hit the Calculate button down below. You'll see that it calculates a value of 5, and we can click OK. And here you can see now the score and the data inside of the patient's chart. And you could then work with this data and bring it forward into whatever you need to. All right, so that pretty much concludes it. Now the documentation will be done. Your office would always have clear and consistent results, and this data would then be reportable. In the future, we're going to review how to pull this data into those progress notes like I talked about. That'll be a later installment of the series, so be sure to come back and watch that one too.
Thank you, Eric, for showing us this powerful tool. And a big thank you to our viewers for following along with this series, and to our clients for inspiring such an incredible feature. Every practice has its own unique documentation needs to maintain a complete patient record. Clinical assessments gives you the flexibility to customize your software and capture the additional data that matters most to your office. If you'd like a one-to-one session about today's topic or any other topic, please give us a call at 800-250-8687, option 2 for support, and submit a support ticket. You can also send us your questions via email to support@mailchs.com. And then if you don't have access yet, give us a call so we can set you up with a user account for CHS One Stop. This is where we post updated training manuals along with other helpful articles and resources for the program. If there are any topics you would like to see in a video, please let us know, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.